You're listening to the Best Morning Routine Ever podcast, the show that proves no one stumbles upon success ever. With your host, Lou Need. Every Mondays and Thursdays, we deliver cold hard evidence behind the power of a robust morning routine. Get ready to be transformed by the renewal of your mind.
Hello, morning enthusiasts. Welcome to the Best Morning Routine Ever podcast. I am your host, Dr. Lou Need, and today I am elated. I'm excited to have with me a very special guest. He called himself a seasoned business leader, but he's youthful at heart, and his name is Mark Musselman, business leader and transformative coach with over 2 decades of experience, guiding hundreds of business owners, top executives towards not just better self, but profitability, impact, and what that long-term sustainability look like in terms of as a whole person, but someone who owns a business or runs a team. He is the founder and CEO of MX5 Consulting, passionate believer in the power of coaching, and he himself as a coach and his personal experiences have shown him how coaching can really drive meaningful change and unlock potentials. And I can attest and agree with that as well. So I'm thrilled that we're going to have this conversation. So with no further ado, Mark, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Lenita. I'm so delighted to be here. I love your format, and I can't wait to be a part of this.
It is such my honor. I'm really excited. I love your journey because it sounds like you yourself started out with a coach, and then because that's what I gathered from reading it. So let's talk about how your journey led you here.
Yeah. So I was blessed to be part of a family-owned business. I went out on my own initially when I finished my university studies and entered the work world, and ended up in a company that, I didn't really fully align with in terms of their values. Loved what they were up to, but there were some things that, didn't align. And my family had a small business, my father and about 7 other employees. My immediate older brother was in it at that point in time. And I left that big corporation, international corporation, to go take some of those skills I had learned in that environment and apply them to this small family-owned business. So I did that, and I was part of that family-owned business for a total of about 21 years. About halfway through that, I have 4 siblings, and all 4 of my siblings joined the business. And near the end of the company, we had about 280 employees, and it was a pretty sizable entity in Colorado. And I ended up being the CEO for the last 8 years of the business. I say the last years, which is part of this jumping off point. But when I got hired by my family, I replaced my dad as a CEO. I knew enough to know that I didn't know all I needed to know at 30 years old to be running, a $30 million business with 200 and some odd employees and 5,000 customers around the United States. And so I hired my first coach in 1999, an executive coach. Back then, as you would attest, almost nobody even knew what that thing was. So he was a pioneer and is still active to this day. His name is Stephen McGee, and he's brilliant. And I hired him multiple times over the course of the next, just say, 10 years on and off, when I really felt my leadership skills needing a jumpstart. But what I knew right off the bat is, I'd gone through school, and like many people, I never really knew what I wanted to do. I had like 4 different declared majors and ended up in economics and kind of stumbled into the world, eager to get busy. And then I discovered this thing when I hired Stephen about leadership. And it was like somebody, lit a stick of dynamite. And it was like, wow.
Yeah.
For the first time in my life, I became alive with passion and interest and curiosity about a topic. And mostly it was like, I didn't realize how little I knew about myself as a person who'd just been thrust into this role of leadership. And he opened up door after door after door. And so I love the idea of self-discovery and that sense of self-awareness. And I think that was what began for me, what has become a lifetime passion and commitment to, serving others as they work through and explore and try to discover their own expression of what leadership means to them.
Yeah, because you've lived it. You were in it, and you know what it takes to run the company, the business, and you know the questions to that were because there's a piece we're going to talk about asking the right questions. You know what to ask to actually get them triggered or open.
Yeah, I think the power of an effective question and the silence that follows that question, right? So there's, I think, lots of people who have great questions, and then there comes a point after the question is asked to just hold for an answer and not feel compelled. When I was younger doing this work, I was really trying to impress people that I was smart and that I knew something and I could really be of help. So I'd ask a question and then I'd sometimes answer the question I just asked. And that really deprives the person working through the question the gift of discovery, right? So I've learned a lot of things, mostly to be still and to be silent and to have patience and wait for somebody to sit with a good question and work through it to find their own way forward. And, the right question and sometimes the question can be as simple as, what else? Say more, go on. Why that? I mean, really powerful 2-word questions that leave somebody with that sense of, well, okay, I'll go to the first level. Now I'm in level 2, maybe level 3, 4. When I get into level 5, level 6, now I'm really, really discovering some things about myself that, I probably already maybe had been aware that were there, but now I'm openly talking about them. And from that place, lots of magic can happen.
And it's really strategic, the way it is set up. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So I think you're right. I mean, one of the things, it's probably a good time to sort of mention this when I work with a client, and I want to be really clear. I borrowed this approach from a woman named Susan Scott, who wrote a brilliant book called Fierce Conversations. And I was given that book in 2002 by a gentleman, Don Myers, who was my coach at that time. And inside that book, she has a question that she begins every coaching session with, which is, what's the most important conversation you and I need to be having right now, right? And that question, given silence that follows and the opportunity to name what's the most important thing, allows, in my case, the person I'm working with to own the conversation, to own the direction, to own their own growth and discovery, right? So that for me is an important question. It's strategic because it sets the tone right from the bat that it's, this is your work. I'm here to facilitate your work. I'm here to help guide and accelerate your work. But these questions are designed for you to sit with them and then, from that work your way forward. So it is strategic. And all those little questions that I just had, which are the 2, word questions, and all of them being open-ended, effective questions. All that is, I'll say, strategy. It's technique. It's years and years and years of practice, as is the intelligence and the wisdom and the experience to let somebody sit in the discomfort of all of what they want to say and what they don't know what to say. Right. There's brilliance in that as well on their behalf. So, I think you're spot on.
Mm-hmm. And I want to talk about how sitting with that question or sitting with that discomfort doesn't necessarily have to end after we part ways or that hour is over, right? Because then we were talking offline about the name of this current podcast, and I told you I sat with it. I sat in silence until it came, and it took a couple of weeks, if not maybe a month or so, for it to come. But when it did happen, it was like pure resonance. It was just like it was meant to be. And so let's talk about this sitting and being still in that silence, the power that lies in there.
Yeah. Well, I had this guy one time, and I love this, and I'll share it with you because I think it's brilliant. Not my work again, but I was working with a guy, and he said, don't just do something, stand there, which is the exact opposite of what we mostly hear. Don't just stand there, do something, right? It's like, get into action, do something. And it struck me as like, what do you mean? He said, what I'm inviting you to consider is slow down, be still, do nothing. And let that space of nothingness create an opening for discovery, for something that the movement and the action and the activity masks. You can't often see the things that you need to see when we're getting from A to point B, and we're always in a hurry, and we've got our phones with us and they're distracting us. So to unplug from all that, and I think this is one of the real gifts of sort of that, whether it's a consulting or a coaching relationship or a therapy or a counseling, is the invitation to be operating at a different speed. Sometimes the speed is do nothing, sit still, and let wisdom, really reveal itself, right? And that's what sounds like it happened to you in your naming of your podcast, right? And it's an intuitive process. I mean, when I do my work, I always say that it's based on the premise of this thing called the primacy of self-discovery, which really sort of suggests that we as human beings have an innate level of wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes what we need is that wisdom to be revealed. And oftentimes that happens, like you said, in your silence, or it happens with a question, or it happens in conversation. Lots of different ways it can come out. But I think most of us know how to move our lives forward when given the chance and given the condition. And, it's this thing up here, right? And the conditioned thinking, all the limiting beliefs and things that get in our way, that if you can get them out of the way, creates a pathway to just oftentimes wisdom, insight, and then this, oh my goodness, that's the way forward. I run into people all the time, I'm sure you do as well, who are kind of just stuck in life, or they're stuck in their bit, and they just don't know how to move themselves forward.
Yeah.
And they've tried everything they can imagine, and still nothing's moving them forward. And so I think the kind of conversations that you've been having for, a long time, 6 years now, a couple thousand of them. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, those kinds of conversations, and people who listen to this, they gain insights. And then what they do with those insights is hopefully what can help them, cross over that barrier and create a breakthrough where they've been stuck. And so I think that silence is a really important component of that.
Yeah, you said something that I want to tap into that's very powerful. It's that it's not learning something new, it's the remembrance, right? It's that wisdom you talked about. It's being revealed because it was never forgotten. It's always been there, but it's been muffled by a lot of noise, right?
Yeah. Well, there's a guy that I knew at one point in time and was doing a lot of work with maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago. And he referred to it as the mud that gets in our eyes. Mm-hmm. Right. And so one of our opportunities is to clear the mud out so we can see more clearly. And sort of metaphorically, the mud could be stories that we've had from our past, experiences that, we've had from our past, shields that we've put up to protect ourselves from things that have happened, all these things that can interfere with clear vision. Mm-hmm. And many of them, there's people who are in my life, and myself probably included in all this at certain stages, something happens, and then attach myself to a story around that thing that happened. And if I listen to that and tell that story long enough, I can put mud on my eyes. And then somebody might ask me a series of questions, which is what I think great coaching does. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, wow, now I can see with that vision, I can move forward and create a podcast that is going to have thousands of people, as guests, and how many millions of people listening to it as, visitors to the podcast. I mean, as a single thing in the world. Right. So, I think that's that piece of revealing itself and that sense of innate wisdom, I think are really critical.
Yeah. And I think the pause when people reach out, like you did at 30 years old, when you were thrown into the CEO role, you called the coach. That was a pause. That was that awareness of like, oh, I don't know much. Like I need somebody to kind of hold my hand and guide me through this process. And I think that pause alone is huge. Just that shift.
Yeah,
it's gigantic in starting the ball rolling into that change that needs to happen, or that awareness is key.
Yeah. Well, I look at this idea of coaching. So I'm 58 years old, lived in Denver my entire life. And I have been a volunteer youth athletic coach for about 23 years. I have a son who's 28 who started playing soccer when he was 5. And I thought, well, I'll jump in. And I have now I'm in my 15th season at a high school. Both my sons played rugby at this high school, and I have just stayed on. So I'm also a thespian. I'm in a musical theater company in Denver. And whether you're in orchestra, or whether you're in athletics, or whether you're in theater, or whether you're in business, having somebody who partners with you in the role of a coach, or somebody who as a guide just accelerates the path towards whatever it is that you're out to achieve. If you took all the coaches off the athletic field and you just put, a bunch of little players running around, it would not have the same outcome. If you took the director and, the choreographer and, the people who produce or around a theater production away, it would not be the same. You could put 30 people on a stage and it would be really difficult without that guidance. So I think there's just a lot of inherent value in anything where we're working to be our best, period. And I think, the purpose of my business is basically to provoke leaders to be extraordinary, because the world needs extraordinary leaders. And I felt that was a good, I'll call it purpose or mission, because it's exactly what I felt I received in 1999 from Stephen, my first coach, and every coach I've had since then and have to this day, that they constantly are provoking me to, basically find that next summit, right? What's my next expression of myself as a leader in the world, so that I can go into the world and be as skilled as I can be, because people depend on it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's just true. I think the world is starving for great leadership. Yeah. Extraordinary leadership.
I love the way you put that, because you made the analogy of the comparison to actually a coach football or soccer and rugby. And that is so true, because a lot of times, especially if you go higher level, they already are talented, right? Like I watched Ted Lasso a couple of months ago. It was brilliant on leadership. I don't know if you've seen it. It was just amazing. And it was just tweaking. Like he said, if you started thinking about the others on your team with your talent,
wow,
the talents,
yeah.
Right?
That's it. And I think, we can look just in every form of society, how it organizes and forms. There's in any organization, I don't care whether it's a faith-based organization, or a government organization, or a for-profit or a nonprofit, every single organization that pulls people together depends on having extraordinary leaders lead that entity. Yeah. And so the more we can lean into having that, which are basically really skilled, self-aware, which I think is the single biggest attribute for a great leader, is understanding who it is that I am, how I operate, what way I occur in the world, all those various things. And then obviously being able to achieve results and things that follow from that. But I think the world needs it. And we're in desperate need of it right now, I think more than ever.
Yeah, because the people that are coming to you already come in with their skill set and talent. They just need that fine tuning, that one word to recalibrate so perfectly. Right. And then they're taking off, and then they're getting the profit, and then they're getting the results, and then they're getting the team in place to run the businesses. It's amazing.
Yeah. I always say that, it's always a degree. I mean, I could be doing virtually everything I know how to do. And sometimes it's that small little thing that I didn't see, wasn't aware of. And that one micro adjustment can change everything, can unlock who it is that I am and help. And through that unlock, the potential. Maybe I'm not good at delegating, right? As a thing, right? And if I can just become that much better at that one thing as a leader, and I unlock the potential and invite, the participation from everybody, wow, what a difference that makes. Or if I could let go of my ego and not always have to be the smartest person in the room, which, I've had a need when I was younger to be that guy. And, that just pushes people away. So if I could check my ego at the door and, show up curious instead of wanting to impress as a thing, right? So all these things contribute. And when those things show up in an organization, it is like magic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And MX5 does precisely that. Like you come in as the anchor, you come in as that person that tweaks just the one thing, 1 degree change that actually get people to excel. How did you come about the name?
So M is Musselman, my last name. The X is multiplied. I have 4 siblings, so there's 5 of us. My family's business went through bankruptcy back in that 2008, 2009 economic window. As a CEO, at the back end of that, I was sort of adrift, let's just put it that way, and in the world trying to figure out what I was going to do next. And so as I thought about what that would be, one of the things that I arrived at was no matter where I go for the rest of my life, I carry sort of the strength of me and my four siblings. So MX5 is Musselman times five. So, I have an amazing relationship with my four siblings, and I carry their love and their strength with me whenever I go out, and they keep me grounded, and they keep me honest and all those things, as any good sibling does. And so that's where the name came from.
I love that. And it just gave me chills because thank you for sharing that.
Sure. Yeah.
Let's talk about the strategy behind it in terms of what others can expect when they come working with you. I mean, we got a pretty good idea of how exceptional you are at what you do. Let's talk about what that process looks like for someone who's considering it.
Yeah. I mean, so I begin every possible conversation or engagement with a discovery call. I think like most people would, I really, really want to make sure there's a good fit. My clients are people who have an extraordinary level of responsibility. They're either business owners or they're running a very large group of people inside of a complex organization. And, I want to make sure they're open there for the reasons that are not them trying to be fixed or solved, but they're working to become the best version of themselves so that they can go back into the organization they're leading and do a more effective job. So I spend about, I've just actually finished like a 7-hour discovery process with a couple of folks just recently. So sometimes it's an hour, sometimes an hour and a half, sometimes it could be up to 7 hours where we're getting to know each other based, on trust. And then I would go through a process I call the 4A's. It's align, right? So assess, align, accelerate, and achieve, which is basically, I got to know what's going on first. So that's why with that 7-hour one I explained, there's a lot of moving parts. It just took me longer. And I'm okay committing that amount of time sometimes to figuring out what's going on. So there's an assessment piece. Then it's aligning around specific goals and objectives. Like, what do you want? Mm-hmm. And why do you want the things that you just shared with me? And then we accelerate the pace or the speed from where they've been to where they want to go. And then the ultimate piece, I think, with the end is a sense of achievement when they can end the whole process and say, I started here, I ended here. And that, in my view, feels like success.
Yeah.
And then there's the other long term. I've had 2 lunches this week with clients that I've worked with over the past 10 years as just dear friends, right? Mm-hmm. So that's the beauty of this, is they become part of my life and part of my world when it really works.
And then they become friends. And so that tells me that just like you did back in 98, 99.
99, yeah.
You they would rehire you again, depending on the season of their life.
Sure, you bet. Yep. I just, in the last few weeks, there's a leader who has a big responsibility who I worked with back in 2016, 17, and 18 pretty consistently as she was getting her hands around, basically becoming the CEO of a company. And then, for almost 10 years, we had lunches, we'd go, catch up and have conversations about life. And then lo and behold, about a month ago, she reached out and said, I am in a crisis. And, I just thought, like, who could I reach out to? And you were who came to my mind. And so we started meeting again. And, the great part about that is we can pick up like that, right? Mm-hmm. Right, almost from where we left off. And she's an amazing human being. And I love the conversation. I love being back in that with her. Beautiful person doing amazing work in the world. And so, as you and I were talking before, this idea of feeling so blessed, mm-hmm. right? I mean, the amount of blessing that comes from the work that I do is overwhelming. And I'm a very competitive person, right? I've been athletic my whole life. I've been in musical theater. I have lots of areas in my life where I've wanted to excel. So I like the idea of establishing goals and achieving goals. And I like partnering with people who are up to something. And I always call them sort of, people who are ambitious. I love working with ambitious people who are open-minded and recognize, I've got this level and I want to go to this level. And I'd like to partner with somebody who can help me get there quickly.
Yeah, it's so fitting because then you're impacting and getting them to achieve their goals. And in return, that's just fulfilling, for you.
Absolutely. Yeah, no question.
Let's talk about your morning routine. How do you get up, dress up, and show up?
It's a great question. And I love the timing of this. I just had, I somehow over the last, I'll say 4 to 5 years, and I think it's possibly a result of COVID. I want to say that as a thing that I think's happened. I've had a lot of opportunities to work with, in particular, young men in their, say, early 20s. And I'll just say for some of them, an experience of a failure to get a quick launch off the launch pad for lots of reasons, right? And so I've been in a lot of conversations in the past couple of years talking to young men about this idea of a morning routine and how that in and of itself sets a person up to win the day. And if you set yourself up to win the day more often, you win the week, and then you can compound from there. I want to be really clear that, I didn't really have what I would call a structured morning routine until about 7-8 years ago. I was in a marriage for 27 years, a relationship with that same woman, Laura, for 30 that ended through divorce. And when that happened, I was adrift. I mean, like adrift, like,
a bag in the wind.
A bag in the wind, absolutely. I think that Katy Perry has a song talking about something up in the way. I felt all that, totally unmoored and really in a lot of pain and, trying to figure out what to do with my life. And at that moment, I happened to come across a guy who was in California who had basically recognized there were a lot of men in their 40s, 50s who had been married, it's a whole bunch of, owned a business or had kids, and he calls it the trifecta of insanity and, just suffering. And so what he introduced to me was a really profound morning routine. I've adjusted it since then to fit my needs, but I have a very specific morning routine that I follow because it works. So I wake up every morning. The very first thing I do when I open my eyes is just thank God I'm alive, right? I thank you for the gift of another day. And then I start with thanking my parents for giving me life. And then I go through my routine of like my siblings and my children and Whitney, who's my soon to be new wife, Laura, who was the mother of all 4 of our beautiful kids, all my nieces and it just expands, right? So it's just, I always begin every morning that way because somebody once told me you cannot both be simultaneously grateful and miserable. And I just prefer to be grateful.
Yep.
It just works better. So I do that, I get up, I go in, I have 16 ounces of room temperature water, I hydrate, I weigh myself. I've struggled with weight pretty much as an adult male, and I just, it's a thing that's, I like to kind of get a gauge on where I am with my own battle with health and wellness, and feels good when I'm winning it and doesn't feel as good when I'm not. And then I go for a morning walk almost every morning. And I say almost because I used to speak in hyperbole and say every morning. I don't do it every morning, but I do it most mornings. And I do it early, like 5:30, 5:45. There's a guy named Andrew Huberman who has this thing called the Huberman Lab, and I love it. And he has lots of great guests on there that are scientific, and they talked about first light, this idea that one of the most amazing things you can do as a human is expose yourself to first light. So I go for a walk, I come back, and then I make myself a cup of coffee, very ritualistic. I love coffee in the morning. Actually, I like cream with a little bit of coffee in it. That's to be really honest, And so I have a cup of coffee, and then I basically go and I do something that feeds my brain. So I listen to Andrew Huberman as an example, or a guy named Sam Harris, or a guy named Brian Johnson, who has a group called Heroic. And it's all thought leadership, basically. And it's all, things that I like. So I do that and then I go upstairs to my office, where I am now, and I meditate. And meditation has become like oxygen to me. It is like one of the most amazing things. I never really had it in my life until about 7 years ago. And I can't imagine my life without it now as a grounding, practice. I then will send off I'll call it a love note. It's basically it's gesture to somebody in my life saying, I'm thinking about you today. Just want to thank you for being in my life. Here's what you've meant to me. Something like that puts me again in that heart of gratitude and appreciation. And then I go and I look at my calendar. Calendar's where everything in my life exists. See what's going on in the day, and then I jump into my day. And at the end of the day, because I like the end of the day too, I go through the inverse. I thank God for the day that I just lived, for the gift of it, and I go through gratitude in reverse of what I did in the morning. So it bookends on both sides. So I begin the day and end the day with that exact practice. I've done that piece since I was a little boy, when I was raised Catholic and I was doing prayers, and some part of my process when I was little was to thank God and and be grateful for the people in my life. So that's like since I've been I'll say 5 years old, and it is as nourishing as anything I could ever imagine.
Yeah, and the gratitude is really good, especially at night, because You kind of, Thomas Edison says, never go to sleep without giving your subconscious something to work on for you.
Yeah.
And if it's gratitude, and if it's just like thinking about the good that just happened, guess what? Your mind is mulling over for the next 6 to 8 hours.
Isn't that beautiful?
Yes. And then when they say the night routine starts the night before by doing just that simple thing, because then you're preparing for the next day.
Yep. Yeah. So that's my morning routine. And like I said, honestly, I don't know if I would say I had one. I've always been an early riser. I wake up.
Ambitious people are. They are early risers. 4 a.m., 5 a.m. Like the world is still asleep and they've already got 2 hours on the world.
And I don't know if I mentioned this in anywhere, but I am a co-founder and part owner of a business in Dublin, Ireland. It's a fast casual Mexican set of Mexican restaurants called Tula Mexican Grill. So my co-founding partner, his name is Tony, lives in Dublin. He's from Ireland. I met him coaching his oldest son in soccer and in rugby, and we've remained dear friends. So I wake up oftentimes at 4:15 because it's 7 hours in front of us in Dublin, and he and I have a conversation probably 3 to 4 times a week at that time, And so I'm an early riser. I've never needed an alarm. I wake up, my feet hit the ground, and I'm ready to go. And so the only thing that stops me from doing that is, if Whitney sometimes wakes up at the same time I do, then I'll linger otherwise on my own schedule and just going and doing my thing.
Yeah, and you mentioned the light, the exposure. It's the circadian rhythm thing, right? Like we got to get up and show and get into sunlight ASAP. I have a 2-year-old, and to kind of get her circadian started is when she wakes up, I would bring her outside. Like here, we sleep at night. When we wake up, we stay up during the day.
That's right. And I think you've just named it. I couldn't remember the name of what that thing was, but I think the circadian rhythm. And, when we expose ourselves to that morning light, it really is like, I don't know if it's psychological, physiological, what it is, but there's some benefit that I remember him saying. And ever since he said, it's like, I'm up, I'm going to go out. And I, even if it's cloudy, he said, it doesn't matter. You just put yourself out that pre-dawn and then dawn, right? And that is a huge way to start the day. So
yeah, they're not fresh air. You smell mildew. You smell woods. Like especially if it rains a little bit, it's just like you're camping.
Totally.
It smells really nice.
It's funny you should say that because in Denver right now, all of the crabapple trees and the peach trees and all the fruit blossoming trees are in full bloom.
Gorgeous.
And you're out at 5:30 in the morning and they're like fully blooming. And there's no traffic and there's no, exhaust. It is a fragrance overload. It is unbelievable. And I'll just stop there and just like sit in the middle of these trees. And it's like, oh my goodness, how could this possibly be? It's such a gift.
You can't be miserable after that. Like you set the tone already for your day.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, one of the other things I'll mention is it was a guest of his who said, when we walk, we typically look down at the sidewalk or whatever it is where, obviously if you're on a bunch of loose rocks, you probably got to watch where you're going. But I walk mostly on a sidewalk or in a green belt area. And he said, instead of looking down, look up, look at the trees, look at the way in which the wind moves. And ever since that podcast, I've done that. Not always, but most of the time. And it is amazing what happens when you move just that simple, glance from downward and on the things in front of you to up and what's happening. And it's magnificent. It's amazing. So if you're not doing that, I'd highly recommend you do it because it'll change your entire experience of everything you've ever walked on.
And that advice is free. Like this is going to change everything for you. You just got coached. You didn't even know it. Just looking up for me, it's just noticing tumbleweeds while I'm driving on the freeway. Yeah. It's these little things that causes you to pause and get in line and in sync with the universe. And then that actually brings in peace. Just walking and looking at the different shapes of the clouds or as you said, the wind and the trees. It changes everything when you become that awareness because then you're not in survival mode anymore, right? Like now you're seeking peace and you're connecting in a different way. But a lot of people are just rushing out. They don't have time for any of that.
Well, and I want to say that I, again, using that word, feeling blessed, I do create the time and I get up early to make the time and I want to be distinct about that. And, I'm in a phase in my life where all four of my kids are independent. They're off doing their own thing. Right. And so I had a number of years when they were younger, and just catching a breath to do anything was like, a sanctuary. So we run through different, and if you've got young kids at home, I mean, yeah, that's pretty demanding. And I remember that guy I mentioned to you, that first coach, his name was Steven. I remember when I was meeting with him, I have four kids. They were like 8, 6, 4, and 2. And he said, well, Mark, tell me about your hour of meditation. And I wanted to reach across and say, you want to know what my hour of meditation is like? There's no such thing as an hour of meditation in my life with a 8, 6, 4, and 2-year-old. And he, at that time wasn't married, had no kids, and just didn't fully understand like how much time, understandably and, responsibly, is dedicated to raising kids if you're going to be involved in their life at that stage of life. So I'm blessed and grateful that I have those, years behind me. I love them all. And now I have a lot more freedom in my schedule than I, did at one time.
Yeah. And it's a different season that you're in. But
Yeah.
I have to say, Mark, it should be non-negotiable because it does give you more time. It's almost like the morning routine gives you more energy, right? You're like, I'm tired. I don't want to get out of bed and do it. You go ahead and take a walk or you work out. You have more energy. It's like compounding. You're putting something in the bank for later.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. And I actually tell people, they say, well, I don't have time to. I said, here's what I'll tell you. What we know with the research is that even one purposeful, mindful breath can act as a reset. And meditation as a practice is, for me, really showing up as a reset, calming my nervous system, grounding me, putting this thing up here, on the side for a while, and just one mindful, present breath can do that for you. And people who are historically athletic, I say, listen, 10 minutes. 10 minutes is enough to break a sweat. It doesn't have to be an hour. It doesn't have to be,
Right.
But there's nobody who can ignore the fact that you can't find 10 minutes. And my grandmother, may she rest in peace, all about like going to church when we were little. She said, in however many hours, 168 hours in a week, you can find 1 hour for God. It was always her thing. Like you can always find time, to slow down and connect to whatever's important to you, right? I use that as a metaphor or analogy, but yeah, right. So I agree
Thank you
with
for
you.
simplifying it. It has to be non-negotiable because the benefits, it'll cost you too much if it's non-negotiable.
You're right. Yeah, you're right. I agree with you. Thank you for that adjustment. 100% on your page.
It has to be said. I want to talk to you about the nervous system. I gotta let you go. I'm taking too much of your time. The nervous system, you mentioned trauma stuff gets tagged and attached to it, and that one breath you mentioned can release and reset your nervous system. Please tell me a little bit about that, because a lot of people don't understand the nervous system is all over your body and it's carrying a lot of trauma, and that's why we're so reactive. And the benefit.
Yeah. Well, again, I am a consummate consumer of just, I'll call it thought leadership, information, science. I love it all. And there have been a number of people who've really looked at the physical, psychological, physiological benefits of the gift of even one single focused breath. What it does is it takes anything that's up here. I'm using that as sort of a level of anxiety and energy, and it just drops it. So if you and I on this call right now, I just do one, and you can feel it
Vibrating in my head right now. Vibration is happening. New ones are firing.
Yep. And for many people specifically, who are in a work environment or a family environment that's chaotic and crazy, you're about ready to go into a meeting. You just came out of a crazy meeting, or, you had a really upsetting conversation with your spouse or your partner or whatever. Just before you go and take the next step, just ground yourself and then proceed. Right? It's very similar to the whole thing we talked about, being still.
Yeah. Well, but Mark, where can we find you? How do we connect with you?
Yeah. So probably the easiest way is just through my email, which is Mark with a K, very clear about that, at mx5consulting.com, or I have a website, which is www.mx5consulting.com. If you go there, there's I think a contact us, button. You can do that. And there's a way to send a message to me if you want to get in touch that way.
I love listening to you. I love listening to what you have to say and all that you embody. Thank you for sharing your presence today. Please be kind and leave us with, I know you're an avid reader, with either a quote or something that resonates with you that we can sit with while towards the end of this.
Well, I'll say it in this context. I have a 23-year-old son who lives in New York right now, and he's thinking about moving, and he's got all the anxieties with, a person confronting a big change in life. And I shared with him this model that I've kind of lived by my whole life, which is, leap and the net will appear, right? That sense of trusting that there's something greater at play. And it's the courage to let go of what you know and what you have and trust that something new will appear in the space, the void, and that'll, catch you and move you forward. So leap and the net will appear.
I love that. In that notion that things are not happening to you, they're happening for you.
Yeah, you bet. I love it.
I love it. Thank you, Mark, so much for coming and sharing with us. It's been such a pleasure having you on.
It's been a delight for me. Thank you so much, Lenita. Thank you. It's been a wonderful conversation.
All right, morning enthusiasts, that's it for today's show. Thank you for tuning in. If you love the Best Morning Routine Ever podcast, we'd love to hear from you. So go ahead and subscribe, rate, and give a review on iTunes or Google Play. While you're at it, tell a friend about the show. Be sure to visit bestmorningroutineever.com and our Facebook group to join the conversation, access the show notes, and discover our fantastic free bonus content. Until next time,